This is BBC Radio 4, where now love and family loyalty are the themes of this afternoon's play. Based on a true story, the writer Peter Sheridan has dramatised his compassionate memoir 47 Roses about a delicate but awkward situation which arose after his father's unexpected death.
I was working away from home in Derry when the news came that my father had died suddenly in Dublin. I got on a bus and came home to bury him, sad that I'd never have the opportunity to say goodbye. We sat in a big circle round his coffin and waked him. There were 6 surviving children: Shay, Ida, me, Johnny, Gerard and Paul. Frankie had been taken from us in 1967 at the age of 10. We sang songs and we told stories. We laughed and we cried. At Ma's suggestion, we read out the horse racing results for him. 2 days later, a large crowd stood around his grave in Glasnevin Cemetery. As the official church prayers came to an end, my younger brother Johnny raised the trombone to his lips and blew a note. The sound of Frankie and Johnny, Da's favourite song, filled the air. Frankie and Johnny were lovers. Oh, Lordy, how they did love. Swore to be true to each other, just as true as the stars above. He was her man, but he was doing her wrong. I always loved that song, Ma.
As far back as I can remember, he loved it. Now, will you stop asking so many questions and help me find Doris's address?
You don't have to write to her, Ma. She was Da's friend, not yours. You didn't even like her, did you?
Your father made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd let Doris know. I am not going back on that promise.
When was the last time she wrote to him?
She never stopped writing to him. She wrote to him a few weeks before he died.
And how did you feel about another woman writing to Da all the time?
I didn't mind the letters so much. It was her coming here I didn't like. I didn't like having her under my roof, that was all.
She only came here on her holidays, though, didn't she? I always assumed she had a husband back home in England. She didn't have a husband, did she?
No, she never married.
She had a child, though. She was the same age as me, Amanda. I always remember she was a great swimmer. Was Doris not married to Amanda's father?
I thought you'd come here to help me write this letter. You said you'd help me. Now, if you don't help me, I'll do it myself.
All right. Put your address on the top right-hand side there. And the date under it. I suppose I better start with Dear Doris.
Dear Doris, I'm writing to tell you that Peter passed away 5 weeks ago.
We buried him with his parents and Frankie in Glasnevin Cemetery. I know you'll want to come and pay your respects. I have a bed in the spare room, so you're welcome to stay here. Let me know when you intend to travel, so that I can be here to meet you. Yours sincerely, Anna.
You don't have to put her up, Ma. She could stay in a bed and breakfast in a small hotel.
She'd look well now, knocking on doors in Gardner Street or Mountjoy Square looking for a bed. What if she got mugged? I couldn't live with that in my conscience. No way. Your father'd never forgive me. That'll be her now.
How did you get to the cemetery? Did you take a taxi?
No, I walked.
You walked? That must be 5 miles.
How did you know the way?
Peter showed me. Time Frankie died. Peter backed me off the boat and walked me to the cemetery, along the river and up past the college where the priests do their study. Then he took me left and right and pointed out Mountjoy Jail. It's only a stone's throw from there to the cemetery. I retraced my steps this morning, and I remembered it like it were yesterday. The Brian Boru pub is still there. I was going to put my head into it for old time's sake, but I didn't in the end. I had my 47 roses. I brought them over, all the way from Blackburn, and I wanted to put them on the grave, just like I promised Peter I would.
What do you mean?
Peter asked me to put red and white roses on his grave.
He asked you to do it?
Yes, he asked, and I promised.
So, you put 47 red and white roses on his grave this morning?
I tidied up the grave too. It were a bit of a mess.
You didn't need to do that. I can look after his grave. Peter was my husband, after all.
Well, you know the way it gets in winter time with the rain and the leaves and all the dirt.
I looked after Peter when he was alive, and I'll do the same with his grave now that he's dead.
And I'll give you any help I can, Anna.
That is quite all right, Doris. And when I want your help, I'll ask for it. Oh. Would you like a hot sup of tea?
Oh, no, thank you. I think I'll go up and lie down for a little while. I'm tired after all that walking.
What was all that about?
You don't want to know.
I do want to know. And what's with the red and white roses? And why 47? That seems strange. Do you think it's strange, Ma?
Nothing seems strange to me anymore.
Why 47?
Because it has been going on for 47 years, son.
What's been going on? You're talking about an affair between Doris and Da. Is that what's been going on for 47 years? Ma, tell me, Ma. Why have you let her back into your house if you knew what was going on?
I thought things would be different now. I thought things might have changed with Peter's death. Looks like I was wrong. Oh, there's no end to it, Peter. No end at all.
It's all right, Ma. It's all right. It was a very upsetting encounter, but it was also very compelling. There was more to this story, much more, and I had to find out what it was. 2 months after Doris's visit to Da's grave, I went over to England to see her. She met me at the train station and walked me to her house on Victoria Street. The first thing I noticed were the 2 radios sitting side by side on the cabinet. What do you need to?
Well, this is my Dublin radio here. I have it tuned to RTE. My other radio is tuned to BBC.
And why can't you just do it all in the one?
I'd be afraid I might lose it and never get it back. I'd be lost if I didn't have Dublin. It were Peter tuned it in for me, you know. All those lovely Irish voices. I've heard Shay on it talking about his films. But you sound more like your father. You have his voice and you have his name. He told me it was Padder in Irish. Is that right?
You have a good memory.
I remember most of what your father told me. He were a very good talker and a good listener too. That's why I fell in love with him.
Did you really love me, Dad?
Yes, I loved him very much. From the first moment I saw him, in fact. I thought we'd get married. I was sure we would. We were made for each other. It was obvious right from the start.
Well, how could you marry him when he was married already?
He wasn't married when I met him. Not the first time.
When was that?
It was the summer of 1947. He was a single man then.
How'd you meet him?
I booked into a holiday camp in Skerries. Red Island it were called. I was in love with Ireland from listening to Count John McCormick on the radio. My parents thought I were mad. What's wrong with Pontins? They said. But I was 23 and could do what I wanted. So I went to Ireland on my own, under strict instructions not to engage any male persons in conversation.
So, why did you talk to me, Dad?
Well, I was standing in line to buy my train ticket, and I thought the man in the ticket booth looked just like Count John McCormick. I'd never seen him, but Peter was just how I pictured him. All round, full face, with red cheeks and black hair parted on the left, no grease. He looked Irish and friendly to me.
But how did you get into conversation with him?
He offered to help me with my suitcases, but I wasn't falling for that. Then he kept mentioning my accent, saying how lovely it was, calling me exotic. He gave me a return ticket for the price of a single and said my boyfriend were a very lucky man, and I walked off.
I can't believe he let you walk away that easily.
Well, he insisted on carrying my cases and kept me company until the train left. He was so romantic. He sang me, "I'll take you home again, Kathleen." So, gave him me address and invited him to come to the dance at Red Island on Saturday night.
And did he show up at the dance?
Yes, but I missed him. He'd won some money on the horses and stayed drinking with his pals in town. By the time he came out on the late train, I'd gone back to Michelle. I should have stayed and met Peter. It were a tragic mistake, and I'm still paying for it.
And how did you find this out?
He wrote to me in Blackburn and told me the whole story of that night. You were a wonderful letter writer, your dad. I wrote back to him at home, but he never replied. I wrote 2 or 3 times and received nothing back. I even wrote to him care of the train station, but by that time he'd been transferred to Dundalk.
You must have been very disappointed.
No, luckily they sent on me letter, and he received it. It turned out he hadn't received any of me letters sent to his home. I got a reply from Dundalk, and he told me all about the town and the racetrack, and how he'd won some money, but he said naught about Anna. Never mentioned her in his letters, not even once. I booked again for Red Island the following year. I wrote to Peter giving him my travel details, and he wrote and asked me to meet him at Madigan's Goalpost, a pub in North Earl Street.
What happened?
He was sitting in the bar with a man whose name was Todd. Then a woman joined us and Todd made the introductions. I asked if she was Todd's girlfriend, but no, Todd said Anna was Peter's wife. I thought it were a joke at first, and I said, "You're not married to Peter, you can't be." She replied deadly serious, "Peter's my husband and I am his wife."
I'm awful for you. You must have been devastated.
Peter suggested the 4 of us could go dancing. Todd thought it was a great idea, and I realised why they'd brought him along. Anna excused herself for the toilet, and I had my chance to talk to Peter alone.
How did he explain what had happened?
He was very, very sorry for the awful mess and said he'd made the worst mistake of his life. Said he couldn't have married me because he was a Catholic, and I was Protestant. He even said his dad was old IRA.
No, that's true. He was out fighting in 1916.
I said you can ignore everything for love. He couldn't argue with that. He just said he didn't want to lose me.
And that was all he said?
Yes. And then Anna came back from the toilet. As I watched, I suddenly noticed from the way she walked she was pregnant. Peter's baby, and she was glowing with it. Her happiness was my despair, and Peter looked like a man with his foot in a snare. He'd made the worst mistake of his life, and now he had to live with it.
Do you think Anna was pregnant, and that's why he married?
I don't know. Oh, it's an explanation. You must be feeling hungry after all this talking. Let me make you some lunch. I won't be a tick. You'll be surprised by what I've got for you to eat.
Could this be the true account of what had happened? There was a compelling logic to it. I was disturbed because everything I'd believed since childhood was now in doubt. That meant Ma was pregnant in her wedding photograph, and the well-placed bouquet was there to hide her bump. I went home to Dublin determined to get the truth from Ma. I sat myself across the kitchen table from her and froze. There isn't a nice way to ask your mother if she had a shotgun wedding. So I asked her if she'd like a lift to the bingo, and she said yes. The following Monday I came round to sort out a leak in the kitchen. To my surprise, Ma was polishing the hall table, and she was in great spirit.
Hope to see the holy ground once more. Fine girl you are!
You're in great form. You must have backed a few winners, did you?
You'll never believe the news I'm after getting. Guess who's coming home? She's been away since 1952, the year you were born, Pete, and she's coming home for good. Me sister Dimpna.
She's coming home from Australia.
All the way from Australia. All the way from Australia.
I knew she'd have answers to questions I couldn't ask Ma. As soon as I met her, I knew we'd get on. She had that sense about her of having shed her inhibitions in a foreign place. She was so much Ma's sister, but she was different.
I suppose you get sick of people saying you're the spit of your father.
No, not really.
I nearly fell off my chair when you had a slice of bread and butter with your tea after your dinner.
What? Did you set them up on the first date, Manda?
Are you mad? Anna was a legend in Dundalk. The men were mad for her. Jerry Kernan had a terrible soft spot for Anna. He was married, of course. The Dundalk men were always hooers for sex, and that's not a word of a lie. Anna used to organise late-night poker sessions in the canteen where she worked.
Yeah, he turned up for the card game. That makes sense.
Oh, not quite. Anna told him if he could offer something for the table, it might help his chances. The next day, he presented her with a deck of cards. The box showed an ad for McCardle's Ale. When she took the cards out, he'd scratched the word McCardle off all 52 cards. In its place, he'd handwritten her name, Anna. He got an immediate invitation to the card game after that.
And did he win any money off her?
No, and it wasn't for the want of trying. You couldn't keep him out of the canteen after that. His bosses were so worried they transferred him back to Dublin. Anna went after him and ended up staying in a house in Dorset Street. He was leaving her home one night when guessed who he saw going into a house opposite.
Jerry Kiernan, I suppose.
Yeah, you'd make a good detective, you know that. That put the skids under your father, I can tell you. His nibs was too close for comfort. Peter convinced his parents to let Anna move into Friary Avenue.
My grandparents let them sleep together before they were married.
Anna slept in the girls' room. We were very holy in those days. Boys and girls didn't sleep together until after they were married. There's Anna now, coming back from the shops.
I had to investigate the date of their marriage once and for all. They claimed the 5th of April 1948 was their wedding day. Shay was born 10 months later on the 5th of February 1949. They couldn't lie about the date of his birth. If they were going to falsify anything, it had to be the marriage date. I set out for Halston Street Church. The housekeeper brought me into a sitting room. 3 minutes later, I was browsing through the register of marriages for the year 1948. There, on the 5th of April, was the entry I'd been looking for. Peter Joseph Sheridan of 5A Friary Avenue to Anna Megan of the same address. The witnesses were recorded as Patrick Sheridan and Dimpna Megan. The signatures were undoubtedly those of Ma and Da. I was delighted Doris's version of events had proven to be incorrect. I felt rotten too because I'd betrayed Da in my heart. I thought the worst of him, and Ma as well. In the absence of someone to slap me across the knuckle, I berated myself. Back at the house, I asked Ma where the letters from Doris might be.
Da always kept them in the old shoebox, but I looked there and there wasn't a sign.
I never threw anything out. They must be here somewhere.
It's a mystery to me, but I haven't seen sign of a letter since his death.
Did it ever occur to you that Dad might be Amanda's father?
Of course it did. Crossed my mind many times.
Did he ever say anything to you?
He never discussed it, no.
Well, there has to be a reason why she's coming over, putting 47 roses on his grave. Do you not think so?
That one never needed an excuse. If your father sneezed, she was on the next boat.
I decided to pay Doris another visit. I wanted to know why she stayed loyal to Peter, why she'd remained faithful to a man she could never have. Only one answer made sense. Amanda was his daughter.
I haven't anything in for lunch, but I can go and get some mackerel if you'd like that.
Don't worry about the mackerel. I have something to ask you.
You can ask me anything you like. If I can answer it, I will.
Is Peter Amanda's father? Does that mean yes? Well?
She's not Peter's child, no. You thought she was.
I'd have put money on it.
Amanda's father was a man called Alex Whiteley. He was a policeman here in Blackburn.
How'd you meet him?
When I found out about Anna, I tried to kill myself. I bought a bottle of weed killer in Comfrey's Hardware. Sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the bottle. And a strange feeling came over me. It wasn't my life on the label. My love hadn't been poisoned. Not by me. Not by Peter. Poison was coming from those who didn't want us to be together. I wrote to Peter and told him what had happened. He wrote back and told me I must never do anything to endanger my own life. If I made that promise, he would always stand by me. He would never let me down.
He'd let you down very badly, Doris.
I was so upset I couldn't come out of my room. They brought Alex Whiteley round to talk to me. He was very nice, things he said. I wrote to Peter and told him. He was very jealous. I was delighted. He even made up stuff to annoy him more. Led Alex on so bad that I'd have things to write to Peter. I didn't know about sex, but I got caught the very first time. Thought my life was over. I suspected he might not want to write to me after what I'd done. How wrong I was. He wrote to me letter after letter supporting me. He didn't judge me the way the others did. He just offered me his support. I thought it would finish us. And I ended up loving him more.
And what about Alex Whiteley? Did he abandon you and the baby?
No. We moved in together. He asked me to marry him, but I wasn't sure. I didn't love him, you see. One night he came home late and I was writing a letter to Peter. He demanded I stop writing and I said no. That will have to stop after we're married, he said. You'll be obedient to your husband because that's the law of God and it's written in the Bible. Next morning when he went to work, I packed my bags and left. Never trust a man who quotes the Bible. Peter was the most important person in my life and Alex Whiteley wasn't going to take that away from me. Peter wrote and invited us over. It was supposed to be a holiday, but I knew there were problems with Anna. She'd put him out of the marriage bed. That hurt his pride. Peter needed sex. He had to have his drink and his horses, and he had to have his marital rights too. When Anna put him out of the bed, he turned to me.
Did you have a sexual relationship with Peter? Did you ever sleep with him?
I told you before, I could never do anything that would break up the family.
So you didn't have sex with him?
You believe I did, don't you?
Well, I think he slept with both of you.
He wanted us to live together. That was his plan.
So he brought you and Amanda over to see would it work. He had you all under one roof, and he lived like he had two wives and still one. He was intimate with you when he came to stay in our house. You're not going to confirm or deny that, are you?
Some things are private between two people.
You told me I could ask you anything.
I told you I'd answer if I could, only if I could.
Well, there was a lot of tension in the house when you stayed. You and Dan put us through an awful lot. I just hope it was worth it, that's all.
I slept in the room beside the bathroom.
It was Ida's old room, I remember. She went upstairs and shared the top room with Amanda.
Peter told me not to lock the door.
Did you? Did you lock it?
My bedroom door was never locked where Peter was concerned.
Did you never try for a baby?
No, because I didn't think that was fair on Anna. Catholics marry for life, I knew that. I had to respect Peter's religion. Couldn't do anything that would make him hate himself. I wanted to share him with Anna, that was all. That was what Peter wanted, and that was a price I was prepared to pay.
I have some good news, Ma.
Good news. That's always a welcome commodity.
Da is not Amanda's father. It's a man called Alex Whiteley. He's a policeman.
How'd you find out all this?
I went over to see Doris. Spent the day with her. She told me the whole story.
You be careful what you believe, Pete.
What do you mean, Ma?
She's not a bad person. But there's badness in her, if you know what I mean.
What, you think she could be lying?
I don't think she lives in the same world as you and me.
What, you think she's making it all up?
No. I think she believes it. But it's not necessarily the truth.
And how did you feel about having an affair with her?
He never admitted that. I suspected him. Of course I did.
How did you feel about her sleeping under your roof?
I didn't feel good. But what could I do? Put your father out? How would I have survived? I had no money, only his.
You know, I didn't know you had to face that when I was a kid.
I told you. You don't know the half of it.
How did you survive?
I suggested we take in lodgers. It was a trap. He came back to me a week later, convinced the idea was his. He had an ad ready to go in the paper. Now, I had to get one thing clear with him before he put it in. I wasn't going to take in lodgers and be an unpaid slave. I'd work hard for them, but their money was mine.
I wouldn't say he took that lying down.
He put up a good fight. Wanted to open a savings account. I wasn't having any of it. I held on to the money and I kept my mouth shut.
I'll never forget those lodgers. You hand-washed their clothes, ironed their socks and their vests for them. You must have been mad.
It kept the queer one out all the same.
What do you mean?
Doris and Amanda were due in the summer. Your father came to me about March and wanted to know where I was going to put them. But I told him there was no room at the inn, and he nearly went off the rails. I had to remind him that the lodgers were his idea, and that nearly killed him. I was waiting for him to suggest 3 in the bed, but he never did. Doris must have said no to that suggestion.
So what'd you do with the lodger money?
I bought a car. I bought it in Stafford's garage. What was it called?
Come on, I want you to say it. Come on, it was a Ford.
A Ford. Perfect. No, that's not right.
It's a prefect, Ma, but you christened it a Ford Perfect. And it's a much better name altogether.
I sat in that car and I wondered how the hell I was going to get it home. I had to tell the man I couldn't drive. Dad came round and got it. He wasn't slow in taking charge of it, I can tell you. I nearly divorced him over that car. That was the nearest we came to splitting up. Doris was in the middle of it too. Surprise, surprise. We went down to meet her and Amanda coming off the boat. Oh, she couldn't get over the car. It's wonderful he has the car for you now. You must be very pleased, she said. I believe he collects you from the supermarket. I'd love to get a driving lesson, Peter. Would you teach me? It's not Peter's car, I said. It was my money bought the car. It's a family car. That stopped her in her tracks, I can tell you.
Dad sat through that conversation and kept his mouth shut. He'd some neck.
I wanted to kill him. I really did.
Well, you should have taken the care off him at the very least.
No, I wanted to throttle him. It was murder or nothing.
So where did Doris and Amanda stay in that trip?
Amanda stayed upstairs with Ita, and Doris stayed at Red Island. Da drove her out that night because she missed her train. I was waiting up for him when he got home. It must have been 1 o'clock in the morning.
Did you throw the dishes at him?
I told him he was going to have to choose. Doris or me. I told him straight out.
And what did he say to that?
Oh, he said he loved me and he was sorry about the car. And I said I didn't give a damn about the car. Doris or me. It's simple. Make a decision one way or the other. I thought the two of you could work and get on together, he said. That's what I've prayed for all these years. It's a 2-horse race, Peter. And you're going to have to back one of us.
Well, he knew about gambling and odds, that's for sure.
I was at the end of my tether, I really was. I wanted peace, even if it meant him leaving.
What did he say to that?
He cried at first, just like a baby. Said he couldn't leave his family, he couldn't walk out on us. I told him he could.
Oh, that was very brave of you, Ma. Say that.
It was the end of the road, Pete. I didn't have any other option.
And what did Dad say?
He said he'd wait till she went home and then he'd write and tell her not to come anymore. I told him to tell her face to face, but he thought it'd destroy her. It was his decision. I couldn't tell him what to do.
Did he ever write that letter to Doris? The one telling her not to come?
Hello? Yes, hi, sir. How's the weather in Cork? It's raining. No, Peter's here with me. It's your sister, and it's raining in Cork.
Well, I'm just going out the back for a minute.
So, how are things down there?
These letters, they have to be somewhere. Dan never threw out anything. He was a hoarder. I wonder what's in here. The theatre programmes. The Shadow of a Gunman by Sean O'Casey.
What are you doing here?
I was having to borrow Dad's drill. Would that be okay?
As long as you bring it back. That was Ita. She's not going to make it up for the anniversary. She's stuck down in Cork. I was hoping she'd come up to Glasnevin and help me tidy the grave a bit.
Yeah, the grave is perfectly okay. You don't have to clean it.
I can't have it dirty. I want it spotless. I don't want to leave leaves or paper lying on it. I can't have that.
Oh, all right, I'll take you up. When do you want to go?
We'll leave it till the 13th, the day before the anniversary. That way it won't have time to get dirty again.
Ma packed a trowel, some cleaning rags and a bottle of fresh water in her bag, and we headed for Glasnevin. At the grave, we got down on our hands and knees and gave it a good going over. By the time we were finished, it was gleaming like a new pin. It was good to kneel beside Ma and say a prayer, remembering Frankie and Dad. We were no sooner home than Ma was running up the hall stairs and landing with a hoover in her hand. Ma, you don't have to do this. You'll make yourself sick.
I'll only be a minute, please.
Well, I can hear you struggling for breath. You need to use your nebulizer.
A little bit of food would have never did a body any harm.
No, I'm turning this out, Ma. Now, you're 72 years old. Now sit down and put on your mask. I'm not going to have you killing yourself for Doris. She's your rival, man, not your best friend.
She's coming over to pay her respects to your father. And he'd want me to do the decent thing. He'd want me to look after her.
You feel you owe her something, is that it?
Doris saved your father's life after Frankie died. I can't deny her that.
In what way?
She wrote about Frankie like he was still with us. She kept him alive in her letters. Dad couldn't talk about him, but Doris could. It gave him permission to talk about Frankie again. It was like he woke up from a coma and came back to us. Started to fight the headaches instead of giving in to them. Only for Doris we'd have lost Dad.
Yeah, I remember the headaches. And the house being in darkness all the time. He must have lost 2 stone in weight.
I thought your father was going to die. I really did.
Well, you feel you have to look after her now because of what you did back then?
Peter's dead. The Lord have mercy on him. He's gone, and we have to get on with our lives.
Well, I can feel his presence when you and Doris are together. It's like Dad's walking round the house, going in and out between the two of you. Trying to stay out of the way while you slug it out with Doris.
I stopped fighting with her a long time ago.
It's still going on. She comes over for the anniversary every year, and I know it upsets you. You know, you're not a saint, Ma. It's okay for you to feel angry, and it's okay for you to say it. It's not good for you to keep it all bottled up. You must feel angry towards Dad, do you?
I feel like digging him up out of the ground and punching him in the chest. That's how I feel.
You know, I'm going to make a suggestion. Don't be here for Doris. Go away. Go down to Cork for a few days and stay with Ida.
Do you think I could do that?
Well, you don't have to be here. I'll look after her and make sure she's all right.
I was surprised you suggested Wynn's Hotel.
Why did that surprise you?
Well, Peter brought me here. We've been to pictures and he brought me here for a drink. I think he thought it was posh.
Was Anna with you?
No, they were fighting at the time. I don't know what it were over. It might have been about money.
It was you they were fighting over. Most of the rows were about you.
Anna were very jealous of me. She didn't like me being alone with Peter. I couldn't understand that because she had him all the time. I told her I would never do anything to break up the family, but I don't think she was listening.
When did Peter tell you to stop coming?
That was the worst day of my life, when Peter said not to come. It were after Frankie died, and I don't think he were himself. Couldn't believe it when I saw him. He'd aged 20 years. He brought me to the grave, and I put a statuette of Saint Bernadette on the pebbles. He asked me to do the same for him. I said it would have to be flowers, and he said roses. Red and white roses. I promised I would, and I never break a promise. Never.
And was the red and white because of Manchester United?
I suppose it were. He always loved Manchester.
Was it at the grave he told you not to come?
Yes. I don't think you should come to Dublin anymore. That's how he put it. Thought he were joking at first. Then I thought he might have been threatened by the IRA. He said it had nothing to do with that. I knew then it was Anna. He denied it, but I knew better.
And why couldn't it have been his decision?
He loved me. Why would he want to throw that away? I begged him to come to England with me. I knew he'd be happy there, and I didn't want him to die. He said he couldn't, but I knew it were Anna talking.
I think it was Peter talking.
She tricked him before, and she were doing it again.
You believe she was pregnant getting married?
Yes, I do.
Well, maybe all right. If that's what you believe, that's what you believe. Who am I to tell you wrong?
Peter ripped me heart out when he told me not to come again. He promised me we'd be together, and I believed him. I still do.
Did he leave you on your own in the graveyard?
No. He brought me to North Wall and put me on boat. I went home to an empty house and an empty country. Turned me back on the only man I ever loved, and I did it because I loved him.
He chose his family, Doris. There was no way he could abandon Dublin for a life in England.
There are things he said to me that are private. Things I'll never disclose. He believed that Anna would die before him, and we'd be together after that.
And he wrote that in the letter?
Yes, he did.
I'd love to see that correspondence.
You never will. We made a pact to destroy the letters. He wrote to me in October and told me the time had come. I was to put the letters in a pile and burn them. I did it in Blackburn and Peter did it in Dublin.
You burnt the correspondence?
Yes.
But there was 50 years of your life in that correspondence. How did you destroy it?
Once Peter asked me, it weren't hard at all. He was afraid you or Shay would get your hands on them. I knew them by heart, so it didn't matter. No one could take them away from me.
You destroyed the letters and he's gone. I think that's sad.
Well, I won't see him in this life, but we'll be together in the next.
Well, how do you know that?
It was the last letter he wrote before he died. He asked me to be with him in the next life. I wrote back and promised I would.
And what if Anna gets there before you?
My luck has to change sometime. Can't lose out all the time. God can't be that cruel, can he?
Maybe not. Maybe you're right. Come on, I'll take you home. You can have a nap before your journey tonight. I took her home, but she wouldn't lie down. She was determined not to sleep through a minute of her time in Irish soil. She'd taken to writing to me, delighted with her lifeline to the family once more.
Dear Peter, I never expected to start a letter to Dublin with those words again, and it seems strange to be doing so now. You're welcome here, Peter. My home is yours, and remember, Peter, you have a bed waiting for you if you need to stay over. I don't want you throwing your hard-earned money away on expensive hotels. Do you hear me, Peter? You're such a spendthrift. I'll kill you. That's what I'll do. Are you listening, Peter? I won't kill you. I could never kill you, Peter. Never. Never kill you.
It was hard not to be humbled by her devotion to my father. It was painful too. Painful to be in her company and feel the depth of her loss. She was an open wound, venting her anger at Anna when she should have been angry at Peter. There was no way she could heal the past until she came to that recognition. The tragedy was, she never would. When Ma returned from Cork, I told her about the letters.
Well, I'm going to tell you. That makes sense. I came home here one afternoon, and Dad was out the back, and there were smuts all over the garden. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was burning garden rubbish, but it didn't look like garden rubbish. It looked like papers. So the queer one could be right.
Do you know something, Ma? I think she comes here because she wants to die. She walks the 5 miles to Glasnevin Cemetery in the hope that she'll collapse and expire from exhaustion. I'm convinced of it.
Why would you want to do that?
To be with Dan in heaven.
That's very morbid. I'd like to be with Dan in heaven, but not yet. Not before tonight's bingo, anyhow. The snowball is worth £600 in under 35 calls.
I couldn't get the letters out of my mind. I went to Ma's early to search through the house again. Ma was in the sitting room with her glasses on and the newspaper on her knee. Smoke was billowing up from behind her head towards the ceiling. Take the cigarette out from behind your back. I'm not the police.
You're worse than the police.
When did you go back on the cigarettes?
I never gave them up.
You've been smoking on the sly all these years?
Yes.
What would Dad say if he was here now? What do you think he'd say?
I think he'd say he misses me.
Nah, you're priceless. I'm sorry for giving out to you. I just hate to see you smoking. But smoke if it gives you pleasure. Don't mind me or anyone else. Do what you feel like doing. Do you hear? On the 8th of May, 1999, Ma had us all around to the house for her 78th birthday. It was a Saturday. On the Monday morning, she went into the hospital for some tests. I flew to the United States to promote my memoir of growing up in Dublin. On the Wednesday night, Paul rang me in San Francisco to say that Ma had less than 2 weeks to live. They discovered a major growth on her liver. I flew home with my son Rossa to be at her bedside.
Rossa, what are you doing here?
I'm here to see you, Granny.
It was that moment where dying is acknowledged, but nothing is said. Over the next few days, we kept a 24-hour vigil by her bedside. It was strange to lie there in the dead of night and listen to her breathe. Air was her element, just as water was Da's. It was distressing, getting to spend these last difficult hours with her, counting her breaths. But it was fine too, because Ma was not in pain. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke from a half-sleep.
Peter. Peter.
Yeah, Ma, what is it?
Did you get the sports headlines?
Huh? You're rambling, Ma. I'll get you, nurse.
Never mind the nurse. Did you get the racing results?
No, Ma, I didn't.
You don't know how Edery did so, do you?
No. I'll find out for you first thing in the morning.
I don't know if I make it, Pete. I don't know if I make the morning.
It was the last conversation I had with her. The following Sunday, at her request, Father Frank Duggan celebrated Mass in her room at the Blackrock Clinic. We all gathered, children and grandchildren, and we celebrated a Mass that was a celebration of Anna. At the consecration, Father Duggan bowed his head. In the silence, Ma drew a large breath and held onto it. She held it for a long, long time, and then slowly let it go, and her head dropped. Shay reached out and took her hand in his. We all followed, laying our hands on her, offering her a sign of peace. Through our bodies, our spirit left the room and went home to be with Peter and Frankie. Finally, we let go of Ma and hugged each other in our sorrow. We sat around her coffin and waked her, just as we'd done with Da 5 years before. I couldn't help but think she was pulling a pint for him in heaven. Or maybe he was pulling one for her. I couldn't help but think of Doris too, and how angry she'd be that Anna had beaten her to him once again. God was cruel. He reunited them in heaven and abandoned her in Blackburn. Now she had no one, only me. I couldn't turn my back on her now. I was her link to the past, and I would have to maintain it until the day she died. I sat down and started a letter to her. Dear Doris, I'm very sorry to have to tell you that Anna passed away on the 23rd of May after a short illness.
In 47 Roses, Peter was played by Liam Cunningham, Anna by Maria McDermott Rowe, Doris by Angela Pleasance, and Dymphna by Stella McCusker. 47 Roses was written by Peter Sheridan and directed in Belfast by Tanya Nash.